Well, thank you once again, Dr. Brundtland. Thank you very much. Let me have one round of applause for Christian for doing a fantastic job so far in moderating our session. But I'm beginning to get scared. The theme of us being the lost generation seems to keep coming back. My kids are more environmentally friendly, and the elders are, and we're sort of somewhere stuck in the middle. Well, this is the time in the afternoon where lunch is just beginning to settle into our stomach, and our attention is beginning to waver. And at that point in time, it's best to introduce one of our lively moderators, Martin Varsavsky. I've known Martin for a long time. Martin is going to lead a session where he's going to introduce us to some of the entrepreneurs of the world and show how they've blazed a trail in starting their businesses. Martin started his first company at the age of 24. Martin is a serial entrepreneur. You can tell that by the way he's dressed. He's constantly exploring, constantly... It's very well dressed. It's very good. It's better than I've seen you. Yes, exactly. He has founded 7 companies in the last 20 years. Some of the largest telecom companies in Spain owe their initiation to him, so it's our pleasure to have him here and host these wonderful entrepreneurs. He did try to hire me many years ago. My mistake, I didn't come work for him, but thank you again for being here, Martin.
Well, you're doing very well here. Thank you. Well, I speaking after the Prime Minister of Norway, I was thinking about, the Google thing. They say, do no evil, and I was thinking that most people whose exports are oil tend to be dictators. So I guess that the Prime Minister here resisted the temptation. And then to be in one of the coldest countries in the world and to speak against global warming, that's got to be certainly a good heart, So I thank you. I think it was extremely interesting. Now, I would like to bring in Thomas Middlehoff, we're going to have a 15-minute conversation. You all know Thomas from his years at Bertelsmann and AOL, but he's doing a lot of wonderful new things now. And I wanted to ask Thomas, well, first maybe you'd like to introduce yourself to the audience as what you're presently doing.
I'm father of 5 kids.
This is some more than myself.
Yes, and I'm seeing your son. So, but much more, I'm heading now Arcandor, which is the formerly Karstadt Quelle, which is a tourism and a retail company, and then I'm doing some other stuff.
Well, I read that Arcandor has revenues of like 22 billion, which is still way over Google's revenues, and he has 68,000 employees, which is, I think, 6 times the number of employees as Google. But I think also you kind of abandoned us in the internet world, right? You were very much with us, and you left for the brick and mortar, the travel industry. Do you know something we don't know about the internet?
It was really an interesting experience when I had, let me say, the pleasure to run Bertelsmann in a time when internet came up, to see the challenge for music and for filmed entertainment. And even to see how the music industry struggled to understand what Napster, for instance, really meant. And at that time, we made some money with our investment in AOL, 10 billion or so in cash. But looking back, I think it was a pity that it wasn't possible to get this Napster approach finally and successfully launched. It would have been 2 years earlier than iTunes, and I think without any question it would have been a tremendous success. From my position of today, working for Arcandor and the former Karstadt Quelle, I'm seeing how much a big company can get in trouble if you don't act early enough and decisively enough. Because when you see the former portfolio of Karstadt Quelle, it were 2 businesses, mail order and department store. In some instance, a minority shareholding in a tourism company with the name Thomas Cook. And neither the mail order division nor the tourism division, they really got what the internet means. And by perspective of today, 40% of our demand is coming already online. And in the 4th quarter of last calendar year, we got almost 50% of our revenues in our home shopping division online. And when you see, for instance, Thomas Cook in Scandinavia, today we are getting 60% of our bookings online already. And that means today it's a perfect experience in seeing that the future growth of these businesses, home shopping and tourism, is coming through the internet.
And
this is real
a
business.
different question. You're also on the board of the New York Times, right? And there's been, I was wondering, where is the MySpace of the New York Times? Like Murdoch got MySpace. Like, is the New York Times going to get their own MySpace or something on the internet, or are you guys going to continue to focus on news?
New York Times is a wonderful example how challenging it is to transform an old existing business model into the new digital world. Today, New York Times is one of the 10 leading websites of the world. It's a very successful partner with Google. But at the same time, there is no real convincing economical business model. And the question is out, how much time will it need to transform the print business model into the digital business model? I think, speaking about my own company, for home shopping, for instance, and tourism, we developed already the model and the proof how this is working. And to give you an indication what this really means, speaking of the home shopping division, we had to lay off last year 5,000 employees just to transform the business model into the digital world. And our assumption is the catalog business is steadily declining by 5%, and the e-commerce business is steadily growing by 15%. This is working well. Speaking of the New York Times, they didn't find today a business model which is generating enough revenues, and this is a key problem.
And do you think the answer is to lay off 5,000 people?
No, it can't be the answer because there are certainly, let me say, critical sizes of this business. A newsroom of the New York Times has to consist 1,000 journalists approximately, and you can't cut it down.
And what about the opposite? Is there any smarter way than Google to monetize ads? I mean, so what you're saying basically is that New York Times is incredibly popular, one of the 10 most popular sites in the world. So that means it gets enormous audiences, but still at that level, it cannot make the money it used to make with paper, right? So what is the idea then? Either you downsize the editorial, or you try to make it work with less, or maybe you've been thinking about some ideas to monetize the publishing of news.
No, I think by my experience, my perspective, it's more about the question how you can add value. If you are offering online the same content, more or less, like you are printing, then you can't win. But when you are saying, okay, I make use out of a broadband possibility, and I add filmed entertainment, I'm saying the leading journalists of the New York Times are going to Iraq, and they are interviewing business leaders, politicians, or let me say whomever, and are giving in-depth background reporting, then the New York Times user will pay for it. It's no question. But if a newspaper is saying, I'm delivering online almost the same what I'm printing the next day, you can't survive.
Do you think
and New York Times is very much on the way in doing this, and with remarkable success. And I think it's just a question of time to find, let me say, the right mix of the different ingredients for the new business model.
And you think Rupert Murdoch will make money with the acquisition of the Wall Street Journal?
Yes, because Rupert will combine without any question a part of his TV network, part of his e-commerce and online activities with the brand of Wall Street Journal. And you can, of course, say on the Fox TV network, you are offering Wall Street Journal, let me say, background comments and whatever. And this should be possible. At the same time, this is indicating which kind of way the New York Times will go and should go.
And are you familiar with the Bloomberg model?
Yes.
And because that's incredibly profitable. That's an incredible profit. I mean, way of showing
Yes,
news.
because he started from scratch, and he didn't start with a huge printed version of the Bloomberg newspaper. He started immediately in saying, this is my database, my informations, and I distribute them digitally. And he built up the entire setting. But when you compare this with an old traditional newspaper like New York Times, they are coming from the print business. Yes, and this is very different. And in some instances, when you are coming out of the typical mail order business, you are very focused and centric on catalogs. And it's not easy to have then the same kind of business model and the entire value chain in place and processes like Amazon, for instance.
A different question now. You run a company, 65,000 employees. You're in Europe. Can Europe compete with the euro at 155, close to 160? Can we compete?
Hardly. I think if you break up Europe, for instance, then you are coming to Germany. It's more or less a third of the GDP in Europe. And Germany is very dependent by its exports. And with this euro, I think Germany can hardly compete with the United States. And for me, it's either a question of time that the euro is coming down and the dollar is coming up, or that, for instance, the export business in Germany is facing tremendous problems.
And is it our fault because we built a very independent central bank that is obsessed with inflation from the past and other things, and the Americans try to have a central bank which is independent, but obviously somehow not so, because keeps bailing people out and give so much money away. Should we be more flexible?
I think it's hard to say this is a mistake or fault of this and that institution. I think starting in analyzing it, it has to do a lot with the fiscal policy of the United States, of the Fed, and if we continue to accept this, and if even the Chinese government is accepting this and other emerging markets, then we shouldn't have these kind of discussions here. I think we should have clearly a discussion with the, let me say, with the United States and with the institutions that this kind of policy can continue.
And about Germany, is Germany better now than it was 5 years ago?
It was on the way, but I have some fears. We got a tremendous VAT increase in Germany early last year. And I think if the outcome of this VAT increase would have been used for additional reforms in Germany, I would have been more optimistic today about Germany's future than I'm today. Because we have to give credit former Chancellor Schröder and his Agenda 2010 a lot. All progress we are seeing just now in Germany is coming as outcome of this Agenda 2010. And since we got the new big coalition, Social Democrats and Conservatives in Germany, more or less the entire reforms came to a standstill. And I think this won't hurt only Germany midterm. This will be even again then a problem for the European Union.
Okay, and the last question of this short interview, you also teach, right? Now, what do you think of the Europeans, what are we teaching young people that somehow may not make us competitive in the future? I mean, what is wrong with our education that somehow there's still such an anti-business feeling, an anti-entrepreneurship feeling, and being an entrepreneur is not seen as a wonderful thing as it is in China or the United States or in other countries?
Yeah, this is a highly complex question. First of all, I'm trying to teach, have respect for old guys like me.
You don't know that.
Yeah, no, I'm in the meantime 55, and some people are saying it's a veteran or something like that. But the second one really is that I believe in continental Europe and even here in United Kingdom, but especially in Germany, we have a very critical position towards entrepreneurs and executives. And I think this is clearly the outcome even of misbehavior of some executives. So, and I think we have to make very clear that we are responsible for how we are perceived, that we should really make clear that we stand for principles, but at the same time, we should have even courage, if it's necessary, to go against the mainstream. I give you an example. There's a famous business leader in Germany with the name Klaus Zumwinkel, former head of German Post, and he was accused on TV, yes, there was raiders came to his house and so on. He was accused that he did some, let me say, false declaration of his personal tax situation. And the entire thing was brought to the public like, we killed this guy. But I think when we are having principles like the independence of media and the freedom of speech, we should have even a principle, if you can't deliver the proof, yes, you aren't guilty. And it was for me astonishing that entire Germany came to the position, this man is guilty. And he had to give away almost all his board seats and supervisory board seats, with one exception, our company. Because I called this man and asked him, is everything that you are guilty? And he said no. And then I said, if you want, please continue as board member. I was criticized sharply for this, but I really think if we have this principle, freedom of speech and free media, then we should have even the other principle, because otherwise it's very easy to kill somebody publicly.
Yes.
And I think we should have courage in the different stakeholders of this, let me say, public environment.
Very well. So I thank you very much, Thomas, for joining us. And I hope you come back to the internet world. And please, a round of applause for Thomas. And thank you very much. And now, yes, please.